5:40 here. Donald Trump gave a long, rambling news conference today. Did it do anything to advance his cause? I don't think so. But there is a terrific discussion of media bias that was on Mark Halperin's show, and I want to get to that in a second. But let's get a little bit here from the top of Fox News.
Our President, Joe Biden.
Empty words. If Biden was so amazing, they wouldn't have kicked him out so unceremoniously. And if he really was extraordinary, he would have gotten a prime slot at the DNC next week. Kamala is headlining the event on Thursday, but Biden's speaking on Monday, as far away from Kamala as possible. Trump says, quote, Kamala Harris wants nothing to do with crooked Joe Biden. They're throwing him out on the Monday night stage known as Death Valley. He now hates Obama and Crazy Nancy more than he hates me. He is an angry man, as he should be. They stole the presidency from him. It was a coup. The Monday speech slot is a huge slap in the face to the sitting president, and everybody knows it. The Obama cabal forced Biden out, and now they're using the DNC to further humiliate him. Jill must be fuming.
Ahead of the Democratic National Convention, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are taking a bus tour together through Pennsylvania. Yeah, and this is interesting. This is interesting. It's the same bus the Democrats threw President Biden under.
Oh.
Isn't that a coincidence? What a coincidence, yeah.
No wonder Joe and Jill are still holding a major grudge.
What's your understanding of his mood right now?
He's in a good mood. I suspect that he is not happy with some of the public statements and public actions that were taken in this whole issue.
Who's Biden angry with? The Democrat inner sanctum.
Listen, I think there was more happening behind the scenes than the public will probably hear about. There is an inner sanctum of Democratic politics where a lot of powerful people are trying to take credit for this, but they don't want to talk about it publicly because they are very, very, very acutely aware of how difficult this has been for Joe Biden.
Who is the inner sanctum? Well, we'll get back to that in just a bit. Meanwhile, Biden's right-hand man, Ron Klain, went on CNN to complain about the coup.
I do think, the president was pushed by public by public calls from elected officials for him to drop out, from donors calling him to drop out, and I think that was wrong. And
why was it wrong, though, for them to do that? Why was it wrong for donors to raise objections to other elected officials?
I think that not wrong like immoral, but I think it was unfortunate because I think that the president had won the nomination fair and square.
Behind the scenes, Democrats are divided. The Biden camp feels scorned, while the Kamala camp is putting on a fake smile and trying to convince.
Okay, so I've had a long argument with Elliot Blatt for 4 years. He has maintained that Barack Obama is the real president. And I don't think what the Democrats did was a coup. They simply bowed to reality. I don't believe that Barack Obama is the real president. He probably wields some influence, but I suspect he's less influential than the chief of staff. Barack Obama is a pretty lazy man. So I don't think Barack Obama is pulling the strings behind the scenes. But Elliot Blatt has been pounding on this issue for years. He says more than I have said that Joe Biden's obviously not up to the task, so someone else has to be running the presidency. And events have broken in Elliot Blatt's favor.
Since the public, Harris has momentum. But Stelter says Trump is just jealous.
I think Trump world's jealous of the joy right now. There's so much anger coming from Trump's speeches. Joy is real and it's important. People can make fun of it and say focus on the policy. But if you ask political scientists and psychology professors, they'll tell you the emotions matter in politics. Sometimes they matter a lot more than the policies. And that's, I think, the big story this week.
That's the biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans. One party cares about policy, and the other just cares about emotions. They want you to hate Trump, regardless.
Okay, you're probably wondering, 40, what is bookmarked on your Twitter right now? So, interesting choice here by Richard Hanania. And shows all-white girl sorority, so there are plenty of all-black sororities. But this is a little bit edgy, apparently an all-white sorority. And I appreciate Richard Hanania's commentary. These girls grew up in a world where every TV show, movie, or advertisement had token minorities. The fact that they felt no need to get some token black friends tells you something. It tells me that they're happy and secure in their identity. Right, so the Home Office in Great Britain says, our mission is to halve violence against women and girls in a decade. That's why it's so important. My gosh, this sounds really important.
I have lost my sister on my knees through domestic abuse. No one has to go through what we went through. Violence against women and girls is ruining our lives, our communities all over the country. 1 in 4 women.
So why do you import men from cultures renowned for how badly they treat women? Right, this woman
But I think that actually my sort of visceral human reaction has probably increased in line with the report we're going to talk about later, because I've been living in London for over 10 years now. And I used to live near here, actually in Westminster, and walk to the pub and walk back home. And I felt very safe and very protected to go out and about on the street by myself. I've moved to a different part of London, albeit more diverse, more multicultural, but not, in the wilds, if you will. And I find, even, over the past few years, where I used to walk to the tube station, oblivious to anyone around me, I'm now increasingly harassed on the street. I will go into the local supermarket, just need to pick up a pint of milk or something. I could basically be in slippers and tracky bottoms and, hair looking like I've been on a Van de Graaff generator. And I go into the supermarket and there's...
So when I was in Australia, there was nowhere where I felt unsafe. All right, you could walk around pretty much any time of day or night in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and you're just fine. Now, I don't recommend having anonymous gay sex on the edge of cliffs. All right, sometimes people take objection to that, and there were a slew of killings against men having anonymous gay sex right next to the edge of cliffs. Right, reckless behavior by the men precipitated an angry reaction in the late 1980s during the peak years of AIDS, when AIDS was a killer.
Often men in there who come up to you, oh, hi, what are you doing? They
right, you just feel so relaxed when you get to rural America or rural Australia, or pretty much anywhere in Australia where there's no criminal threat. And then you get off the plane at LAX and you immediately have to put your guard up.
come into your personal space and you walk down the street, same thing. There was one incident where it was broad daylight. I'd been to a shop up the road in Kensington. It was Kensington by and large, it's a more well-heeled area. And I was walking home and a man started walking next to me in a pokot hat, you know, those Afghan hats, chuntering away, really close to me. And I thought, he's a bit mad. And he kept following me. And he kept following me, you know, one traffic junction, the next traffic junction, until I got to my front door. And I was on the phone to my mum.
Right, it's not completely made up why we had the moniker rape refugees, because so many of these cultures, right, that have invaded the West bring with them a high number of rapists.
Hold someone up, because your first port of call is to say, I just need someone on the other end. I'm feeling funny now about this person's presence.
Right, she was fine. And then we had this influx of rape refugees and severely diminished the quality of life for millions of women in the West. Right, Asian kids whose parents did not finish high school crush Black kids whose parents have PhDs with regard to the SAT. So, this remarkable fact is a function of two things: grossly unequal group IQ distributions and PhDs earned by Blacks being diminished by affirmative action admissions and less cognitively demanding subject areas. Steve Saylor notes, Kamala Harris has had the most ignominious term as vice president since Dan Quayle. Vice president is an easy job, but she was bad at it. Why is the press suddenly convinced that she'll do fine at the tougher job of president? Rob Henderson, prohibition was successful, but one reason it was repealed is because of cultural elites, the shapers of mass culture, who reversed the trend by making alcohol look cool to young people. Unlike with tobacco, where cultural elites sustained the stigma, they overturned it with alcohol. Women value qualities that are linked to resource acquisition, such as ambition, industriousness, and social status. Across all cultures, women were roughly 1,000 times more sensitive to salary when rating men than men were when rating women. So much of the enthusiasm for Kamala Harris is simply relief that she's not Joe Biden. Crowd walks out today when he starts speaking in Maryland. When Kamala Harris cites price gouging by grocers, and I used to work for Kmart in Australia, right? These are the industry profit margins that she's railing against, right? About 1%. That's the profit margin in groceries, and has been around 1% for decades, right? Notice how we went from a 24/7 full court press on Joe Biden's cognitive decline to it completely disappearing from the news within 20 minutes of him dropping out, despite him still being president. Right? It's almost as if the media's concern for the topic was exclusively related to a fear of him losing the election. Right? Joe Biden needs to resign. He created an entire news cycle this morning based on being confused and saying he supports new elections for Venezuela, position that makes no sense, and the White House quickly walked it back. All right, I like Mark Halperin's nuanced perspective here on media bias.
There's one group of Americans who say Donald Trump and the dominant media have defined deviancy down, that he does things that would normally be front page stories or national scandals, and they don't get covered at all because the press is inured now to his conduct. I largely agree with that. And then there's another group of Americans who say that the decades-long liberal media bias that's virulently and both subtly and obviously anti-Republican has gone into hyperdrive in the age of Trump, and that the bias against Trump is constant and insidious. And I agree with that too. Not many people, I think, agree with both, but I'm hoping today to use our platform for what it's meant for, peace, love, and understanding. I don't think we're necessarily going to solve things today, but I would like to have a conversation like no other about this to try to get people.
I guess the question of media bias, I feel, is.
Right. This is Jill Abramson, former editor-in-chief of the New York Times.
So chewed over and talked about that. I don't see that as the big problem right now. I think what 4 years plus a campaign, the last campaign of Trump talking about the fake news media, has succeeded, wildly in undermining not only the credibility, but the importance of the press. I mean, we're talking about the fact that Kamala Harris, hasn't done an interview. She hasn't answered.
Right. This drives people, drives me, drives you. All right. After our basic needs are met, what we usually most want is to feel important. And the news media is simply not nearly as important as they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And this kills them.
Detailed policy questions from the news media. And it's not like there's a hue and cry among the public that she do so. Like, I think in many ways what's striking is how irrelevant in some ways news media coverage of the campaign, especially by the biggest news organizations, has become. We live in, for a variety of technological and business reasons, the current atmosphere is one where the main, political candidates can just communicate with voters without the intermediating, influence or power of the news media. And I don't know, maybe that's how.
Right. Journalism was always propped up by an artificial function of its economics that to advertise your wares to a large audience, all right, middlebrow or lowbrow journalism was often the most effective, particularly for department stores. And that era had pretty much come to an end by year 2000. So the economics of journalism has just been destroyed.
Healthy, given all of the travails and problems that the press has had. What really, worries me and caused me to speak out before President Biden dropped out is I just think we have fallen down on the basic First Amendment duty of holding power accountable and bringing the public and voters crucial information that's vital for them to have in order to vote intelligently. And with Biden, that was obviously his decline, which now we know was obvious to so many people, but there was precious little really solid investigative reporting on that before. And now, I found it very annoying today to read a front page piece in the Times, my old paper, about how purposely vague Kamala Harris is. And it was covering that as if it was praiseworthy. It was saying, which is true, it's an effective strategy to not address fundamental questions from the press. And that's the reality of the media environment now. But I think it's a clarion call for good reporters and investigative reporters to dig. Like, Mark, we talked about this a little bit on two-way earlier. Why have we not read the definitive story of why Kamala Harris was anointed and why no one else got into the race when people like James Carville and others were calling for, essentially a new set of quickie primaries? I mean, all competition dropped away immediately, but that didn't happen spontaneously. And we have still not read like what happened between Biden almost deciding to drop out and everyone getting behind Kamala. What made that happen? I want to read that story, and I haven't yet. So you can.
I agree with that. So I want to do a few things. First, I'll remind everybody, if you want to get a question in or make a comment, please raise your hand. Remind you.
Okay, great.
You said, ladies, do you agree with that? That the bar is lowered in a way you don't agree, Eliana? Jill, do you agree with that?
I don't entirely. I think there. Okay. I mean, how many places have we read about Trump's ridiculous comments about the Time magazine cover? I mean, I don't think.
Well, but as John said, a president defies a gag order. A president is convicted and doesn't show any remorse. A president, insults the vice president, calls her stupid. I think if any other candidate did that, he's defying deviancy down.
I just feel like there's plenty of coverage.
Oh, there is plenty. All right, so
can I just quickly? The press doesn't have the power to do more than cover and editorialize. I mean, we can't remake Donald Trump, please.
I'm with Jill. The problem is that with Trump is that Republican primary voters are fans of his and nominated him, but he is so exposed. There's nothing we don't know about this man. He has been thoroughly covered.
Yeah, and so I'm not suggesting, just so I can clarify my point, Mark, just for a second.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting
here between not only what Republican primary voters care about, but what the American people care about and what is of priority.
So I'm fast forwarding past Jonathan Alter's remarks because the essence of them is the major threat that Donald Trump poses to democracy. And it just tends to be such a dishonest argument, right? What they want is more rule by judges, more rule by institutions that they control. And people like Jonathan Alter think that majority power, that majoritarianism is a threat to democracy. So when the majority of people get the type of politics that they want, that somehow that's a threat to democracy.
Priority for the media to want to talk about, right? And I think we are seeing that tension, and Jill's absolutely right. There's only so much the mainstream media or any media can do to hold this guy accountable who has broken every bound of accountability I think that he's ever faced, right? But I do think that at the same time, to Jonathan's earlier point, if it were somebody else, if it were another politician held in contempt in court in 2014, I really do think that would be explosive. I really do think he gets away with doing things that are either morally or politically problematic. And
so I've often had people remark to me that I can say and do anything and people won't be shocked because I have so often said things, written things, done things that have shocked polite people that there's really nothing more that I can say. And so when you repeatedly break norms, right, there's going to be much less pushback, all right? When you show that you're strong enough to stand up against opposition, then there's simply going to be less pushback. And so you can't keep pulling on the outrage. So where's that link to that Boston Red Sox player who was suspended 2 games, right, for calling a fan an effing FAG word? And when he came back, all right, he received overwhelming support because people just get tired of political correctness. Right, we didn't have the expression, I don't think I'm allowed to say the FAG word. We didn't have that expression in Australia. I came to America in 1977, and within a few months, it was my go-to primary term of insult. Whenever I'd get mad at people, I'd just start calling them the F word, right? And so that's largely a function of culture. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a horrific thing. It's a function of culture. I see in a matter of morality that it's probably about a 1 out of 10. And that was just how everyone spoke. And then by the time I left high school, all right, I picked up the social cues that that was not the way to speak anymore. But suspension for 2 games for calling a fan an effing FAG, I don't have a big problem with it. And I also don't have a big problem with the fans giving him an overwhelming ovation because they're just sick of political correctness. So if the freedom to say some slurs also enables you to tell more truth, such as Joe Biden is senile, and that that person over there is acting retarded, or that person over there looks retarded, or that person over there looks like he's dying of AIDS, right? If, along with the slinging of some slurs, you get more freedom to describe valuable truths, right? It's a toss-up. There's many benefits to having civil, careful, critical discourse where you put a higher priority on civility rather than truth, but there's also substantial benefit to putting higher value on telling the truth rather than civility. So it's a mixed bag, right? If you allow people to get away with saying some slurs, you also are more likely to allow people to point out obvious truths that are denied by the powers that be, such as Joe Biden is senile, or that person over there is acting retarded.
The press at some point, maybe they have to, but the press does kind of throw up their hands a little bit and say, oh, well, you know. And again, I recognize that there's a natural tension because there's only so much they can do. But to your
right, you can only, so much of the news media pose is artificial. It's that 19th century Victorian gentleman, oh my gosh, Donald Trump may have called Kamala Harris a bitch. Oh my God, such a coarsening of the discourse. Now, he said these words in private. So, I mean, how long can the news media pretend to faint over the use of crude terminology? When you know journalists, when you're on friendly terms with journalists, right, they will use the see you next Tuesday word and all sorts of other vulgar terms, and then they pretend to be fainting with shock and horror when a public figure uses the same language that they use in private.
Point of defining deviancy down, when you stop talking about those sorts of things, it does allow more wiggle room to be able to get away with them in a more meaningful sense.
So yeah, I notice many members of the upper middle class trying to tell their children that it's not okay to speak and to act the way that Donald Trump does. And I can see the reason for that kind of inculcation. On the other hand, you can certainly overdo it and see it as a much bigger threat than it is.
Eliana, what is your response to what Jonathan said, that Trump is he didn't say he was like Hitler, but he used the comparison to Hitler's Germany, that Trump is so outrageous that it's right for the press.
Right. So Jonathan Alter brought out the comparison to Hitler's Germany, which I just think is disqualifying, just completely absurd.
Take sides. It's not biased. It's simply siding with the truth and the American way.
I just see it a little bit differently in that I do think Trump has...
There's not a specific exact American way. All right. If we're talking about American way, you're talking about the behavior of 60% of American elites in a certain area. There aren't many specifics that you can just claim as the American way.
I don't think he has a lot of respect for the Constitution or really knows anything about it necessarily. But I think January 6th, disastrous as it was, it did show that he left office. Our system worked. So I don't actually see him as a threat to democracy because he was not able.
Not only did our system work, there never was a possibility of a coup. Right? January 6th was a riot that got out of control. I think it was terrible. I'd like to see all rioters, right, punished, including Black Lives Matter rioters and January 6th rioters. I am a law and order guy. I would like to see the anti-immigrant rioters in the United Kingdom punished. I'd like to see Black Lives Matter rioters punished. I am all for punishing out of control illegal riots. There never was even the hint of January 6th turning into a coup. Right? It was boisterous. It was reckless. It was bad. Right? About 20 or 30 police officers were injured. Right? That's horrific. If you deliberately injure a police officer, I could care less if you got shot. Right? I am fine with anyone who deliberately injures a police officer unnecessarily. I'm fine with that person just getting executed. Right? It wouldn't have upset me if law enforcement had opened up with machine guns on January 6th to regain control of the Capitol. And I'd feel the same way with opening up with machine guns for protesters who blocked the 405 freeway. Pro-Palestine protesters blocked the 405 freeway yesterday in Los Angeles. I would be fine with law enforcement giving a warning, and then when that warning failed, just open up with machine guns. Right? Protesters taking over the Wisconsin state capitol from the left, Black Lives Matter protesters rioting and pillaging. right? Give them a warning and then open up with the machine guns. So whether you're on the right or the left, if you're out there rioting, creating a public disturbance, beating up on police, I say open up the machine guns.
Able to stay in office. Look, I'm not praising it. I don't think anything he did was praiseworthy. I think it was very bad. But simply because of the system we have, I don't see him as a fundamental threat to democracy in the way I think a lot of left wingers do. And on the other,
you love death. You want to die. You want people like you to die. You want some huge burning spectacle because your insides are like a big burning fire. So you love death. I love life. That's the difference between us. You want to destroy. You want to tear down. You want to shit all over places that you disagree with. You want to defecate. You want to vomit. So this is me getting quite mad about January 6th. So many of my right-wing friends were quite pleased by the rioting and destruction on January 6th. I hated it. I think it is a black mark on Donald Trump's reputation. You want to go out in blazing glory. You want to break the law. You want people to ruin their lives. Because at core, you love death. I love life. I love the rule of law. You want to destroy the law. You want to shit all over this country. I want to protect and clean up this country. That's the difference between us. You want to take a shit on the United States of America. At your core, that's who you are. That's what you want to do. You are full of shit. You want to take a shit on this country. You love death. You glorify death. 5 people died. 5 innocent people died from this rampage, and you think it's great? What kind of person thinks the death of 5 innocent people is a good thing? A person who is insanely in love with death. So I remember I came to UCLA in the fall of 1988, a month early, and I was 22 at the time, and I should have known better. And there was a pro tennis tournament taking place at UCLA, but you had to pay admission. However, there was an overlook, all right, a big concrete structure with plants and trees and stuff, and you could kind of see at least half of the tennis if you went onto this overlook. So I hung out at the overlook, and then some other people joined me, and finally they sent law enforcement to the overlook and told us that we needed to leave. And I was, you know me, confronted by law enforcement, I immediately become meek and mild. Well, usually. There was one time there was a homeless man died, and I grabbed my camera. This is in my neighborhood. I wanted to go out and film the law enforcement and the whole situation. And this police officer just starts screaming at me and belittling me for videotaping the scene. And I said, look, I'm a journalist. This is what I do. And he says, well, show me your credentials. And I showed him my Los Angeles Press Club card. And he says, this is out of date. It was like 3-6 months out of date. I said, okay, fine. My Press Club credentials out of date, but I'm still telling you what I'm doing. And he was just belittling me for no good reason. Right? Police don't like being held accountable, just like anyone else. Right? They react really badly to being filmed. And so I didn't back down to him. Right? I kept up with what I was doing. But anyway, police came when I'm at this concrete overlook with some other people, and I'm meek and mild getting ready to leave. And then this other young man beside me just starts getting into it verbally with the police. And as he's getting into it verbally, he slips and he almost falls off the concrete overlook, which could have killed him. So I was participating in illegal behavior that almost led to somebody's death. Right? I've never forgotten that. Right? I was trying to cheat and watch a pro tennis tournament for free. Other people were imitating me. And then there's a confrontation with law enforcement, and someone beside me starts getting into it. And maybe he was a law enforcement officer who almost slipped and fell. And I've never forgotten that. It made me feel sick that I had participated in illegal behavior that almost led to the death of an innocent person. So when you ratchet up the tension, right, when you start screaming at law enforcement, you start screaming at other people, you start getting into increasing riotous mood, right, you dramatically increase the odds that something bad's going to happen, right? When you start screaming at people, when you start rioting, when you start behaving illegally and the tension goes up, all right, your range of options narrows. It's like when I press live to go live on YouTube when I'm going for a walk, and prior to pressing live, I usually have like 12 points that I want to make, and then as soon as I press live, I can only recall like 2 of them, right? Because the extra pressure of going live on YouTube, by my options, my thinking, my possibilities just goes boom, right? Because I'm now under much more pressure. I'm live streaming. Anything I say or do could be captured, recorded forever, and used against me, and could ruin my life, could hurt people who know me. And so that added pressure from live streaming, it just reduces my possibilities. And so too, you help to create a more tense and unnecessarily tense situation. You start rioting, right? You start upping the pressure on people. You reduce the choices. And under pressure, people tend to make worse decisions than when they have serenity.
And I think there are lots of things related to the legal pursuit of Trump that are unprecedented and concerning to those on the right that I think tend to get short shrift in the mainstream media coverage that do raise alarms for conservatives.
Eliana, I just got to jump in here because, first of all,
Okay.
you left wingers, Judge Ludwig and
Okay, let me forward past Jonathan Alder.
Times or the Post, and you could glean the preferences of reporters, which Ileana and I can.
say, oh, the checks and balances will work. They won't get away with any of this stuff. Honestly, I think people who believe that have not been paying close enough attention.
Jill, I want to ask you about something Ileana said, which is my experience from also having worked in newsrooms that profess to be objective, which is, I think if you looked at the network newsrooms or the Times or the Post, and you could glean the preferences of reporters, which Ileana and I can glean, that 95% plus want Trump to lose, and they don't just feel casually about it, they feel strongly about it. Do you agree with that?
I mean, in terms of the way newsrooms vote, absolutely. I mean, I can remember, this is just an anecdote to illustrate your point, is at one of those bring your children to work days when I was still editor of the Times. It was a presidential election year, and we had a mock debate. And I invited, it was long enough ago that Eliot Spitzer played, I think Al Gore, and Larry Kudlow played the Republican. And I was nervous because I had asked the kids, I said, I'm going to let you vote at the end of the debate. And I was petrified that there would not be a single Republican vote. And in fact, there was one kid voted for Larry Kudlow. But, I mean, I don't know how many, Republicans there are in the New York Times newsroom. If there are any, I know when I was there, I never met one. And that's just the truth. But it didn't.
Right. I was friends with one New York Times journalist who was a libertarian, but probably there aren't any Republicans in the New York Times newsroom when Trump won. Right. Many New York Times journalists were crying. Right. It was a major trauma for much of the New York Times newsroom that Trump won the election.
That didn't really bother me because I was trained as a journalist at the Wall Street Journal, and I never made a secret of the fact that I came from a Upper West Side Democratic family. But we could, people laugh about it now, but you can set that aside, and with the distance that any good journalist should have in covering something, you can, report the facts. And
okay, a terrific Meghan McArdle op-ed in the Washington Post.
This opinion a foreign trick. Enter the disinformation specialists, the journalists and academics who devote themselves to checking the internet for bad facts and bad actors, and especially for the malevolent impulses of Trump. Some of their efforts have been useful, including their fact-checking of Trump's more frenetic flights of fancy. Your inauguration crowd was larger than Barack Obama's? Sure, Mr. President. But the larger effort has been repeatedly marred when the disinformation experts have acted as censors, suppressing information that turned out to be true and spreading information that was false. Think back to the years the American public spent on the verge of finding out that Trump was a Russian plant. Recall when it was misinformation to suggest the pandemic might have started in a Wuhan lab. Recollect how a bevy of putative experts assured us that Hunter Biden's laptop was probably a Russian information operation rather than Hunter Biden's laptop. If these memories have faded, remember that just a couple months ago, we were hearing that videos of President Joe Biden's obvious decline were actually expert-certified cheap fakes. After each embarrassment, I thought, aha, this will teach the disinformation experts some humility. And each time they have re-emerged, unchastened. Most recently, when Elon Musk announced that he would interview Donald Trump on an X live stream. European Union Commissioner Thierry Breton sent and then published, on X no less, a huffily worded and, as it turned out, unapproved letter warning that X might face consequences in Europe unless Musk took effective mitigation measures to ensure against the amplification of harmful content. The episode sums up all the ways in which the disinformation specialty has gone wrong with Trump: the arrogance, the confusion of opinion with legal or empirical fact, the destroy the village in order to save. It attempts to shore up democracy by clamping down on political speech.
All right, great column there by Megan McArdle in the Washington Post. All right, terrific Amy Wax interview I just discovered on YouTube. And one thing that makes it terrific is that she spends almost no time talking about her persecution. All right, when you talk about your persecution, how you got fired, how you got blackballed, it almost always creates a stink that you're a loser, right? It's just rarely a winning strategy. So if you want an example of someone who's got a very tight Twitter game, all right, it's Nathan Kaufness. He does not talk much about his persecution. So apparently he's raising funds to sue some college at Cambridge University that fired him. But overall, my impression of Nathan Kaufness, a very tight Twitter game, spent very little time talking about your persecution. John Mearsheimer and his co-author Stephen Walt, who wrote the Israel Lobby, all right, they received tremendous persecution, but they don't talk about it. It's rarely a good idea to talk about your suffering and your persecution, because it makes you seem like a loser. You get into bad patterns, bad cycles. People will instinctively feel a desire to distance themselves from you. And people are primarily interested in themselves, and hearing about your suffering is rarely going to be entertaining or compelling. So there are exceptions, all right? If you can talk about your own humiliation, right? Humiliation is a topic that people are rarely honest about, right? And if you can be honest about your own humiliation, and if you can do it with humor and some sense of distance and empathy for other people, then you may be able to create a compelling story. But one thing that makes this Amy Wax interview so good is that she doesn't talk about her persecution, right? And she doesn't make the kind of reckless commentary that she's made in a lot of other interviews. She's just quite sharp and on point here, talking with Louise Perry.
Comfortably with academia today. So what is the feminization of academia all about? Just to summarize it, and I have summarized it this way, it's the elevation of the values of the nursery and the kindergarten over the traditional, established, customary values of the academy, which have been a long time in the making of, and are predominant in the West, of course, of truth-seeking, of rigor, of empiricism, of disagreement, sportsmanlike, rigorous, vigorous disagreement and argumentation and reason, and all of that. And women, not just women, but also minorities as well, that's sort of a third wheel here that's turning, have questioned those values, and I think actively sought to undermine them in their kind of safetyist, anti-free expression, anti-First Amendment ethos, which,
So comment in the chat, is this quiet for everyone? Yeah, so when I started playing this Amy Wax interview, I had to consider bumping up the volume, the gain. And JF Garupi made this point: the most important thing in a live stream is volume, is audio quality. And I'd like to think that my audio quality is significantly better than it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And when I notice that I have to, bump up the sound, bump up the volume, all right, it's something that I put quite a lot of effort into, right? I put more effort into trying to maintain good audio quality than video picture quality.
Isn't just rooted in feminism, but in a much broader far-left ideology that is critical of, paternalistic.
So there's a podcasting app that really boosts the volume. So for most things that I listen to from my iPhone with my earbuds, all right, I have to have the volume up to about 80% or higher. But somehow when I use the Podbean app, I have to turn it down to about 25%. I don't know how Podbean gets podcasts at a much higher audio level than any other app that I listen to on on my iPhone. And the other great thing about Podbean is that they cut out the gaps, usually in a podcast, just automatically cut out the gaps. So I get to listen to podcasts at 2.0 and also removing the long silences.
Values, masculinity in general, it's really a sweeping critique. And those people have gotten the upper hand. One very recent example, because this just, we think we have seen a shift since October 7th, but the old ideas refuse to die. The Harvard social science dean, Lawrence Bobo, just said, academics who cause scrutiny and criticism of our institution, whose statements elicit that attention, they're not protected by academic free expression.
Wow, Sam writes in the chat, when I had stage 4 cancer, I'd catch up with friends, sit across the table, watching them complain about their problems before catching themselves and asking me how the chemo was going. So we should have people in our lives that we can confide in when we're struggling. It helps if you're part of a 12-step program or some highly intense community, right? You hear a lot about safe spaces in the news media, but the best safe space is to be with your strongly identifying in-group, right? I spend much of my time in Orthodox Judaism, and I never have to worry about encountering dangerous anti-Semitism within Orthodox Judaism. It doesn't happen, right? I agree with the chat world. Inconsistencies in audio volume levels are a nuisance. With headphones, they can quickly become a hazard to your hearing. So I'm thinking about one bloke I knew who was a regular on KBC radio, a regular host, did the news, did commentary, was a big shot in talk radio. Then he went to a concert and somehow they didn't get the sound right. And it just blew out his hearing and essentially ended his career in radio. And when I use something from Podbean, all right, it just blasts my ears. All right, it's like 3 times as loud as any other app, any other form of audio content on my iPhone. So I have to watch that. And yeah, it's constantly trying to pay attention to it because it is so annoying when volume levels are all over the place. So I typically peak more than I would like with my own audio levels, because if I don't bump up my gain, so I'm operating right now with the gain bumped up to 6 here on my Streamlabs setting, but if I don't bump up the gain on my own microphone, then it becomes too soft. And so I suffer those unpleasant peaks where my volume gets cut because I'm peaking, hitting the red. Because if I don't have it pumped up to near the red, then it just comes across as quiet. Yeah, so you want safe space? All right, just be part of the strongly identifying in-group. Seventh-day Adventist, Orthodox Jews, hang out with your attorney friends or journalist friends or people who do yoga, right? Yoga is usually a safe space, right? Having a safe space is important, it's necessary, all right? You don't want to be constantly confronted by ideas and challenges outside of your hero system. It's wearing. So there should be safe spaces with your friends, with your family, with your community. On the other hand, all right, we should not be demanding that schools become safe spaces or newspapers or podcasts become safe spaces. We should have a choice to put ourselves different places. And if we subject ourselves to the challenges of outside opinions at school, all right, school is not a place for a safe space.
Values or, First Amendment values, they've betrayed us. They're going to be punished. I mean, that's safetyism kind of writ large. And it's the insularity. We need to protect people from upsetting ideas, bad ideas. We need to draw lines so that we can maintain, our control.
So in 2018, I was living in Tannum Sands with my brother, and I learned about a triathlon, and I signed out, registered for the triathlon, and I didn't think I needed to train. One, I didn't own a bike, and two, I was getting a lot of exercise just recreationally, so I didn't think it was necessary to train. So I think the triathlon ended up being a 1 kilometer swim and a 40-kilometer bike ride, finished off with a 10-kilometer run. And by the time I got out of the ocean from the 1 kilometer swim, I was in last place. and I was in last place all through the 40-kilometer bike ride and then through the 10-kilometer run. And most of that time, there was an ambulance going on behind me. And I don't think I was a hero, right? I don't think I deserved adulatory news coverage. And nobody treated me as a hero for operating in last place. But there's all this adulation for some female in the marathoner who finishes last. And I don't get it. I mean, there are out-of-shape people who sneak into the Olympics and do absolute crap like that Australian breakdancer, right? People who somehow rig the system and compete in the Olympics where they don't belong, right? I don't think we should be glorifying it. I didn't expect to be rendered a hero for running and biking in last place for hours during a triathlon. It's crazy the amount of adulation given to last place competitors. I think it comes out of a misguided feminine instinct to, nurture the last place competitor. But I think men put much more of an emphasis on competence and not being a nuisance to everybody else, right? If you're going to be the last place competitor, you're usually going to be a nuisance for everyone else.
And maintain a sort of warm bath atmosphere here at Harvard, that whole attitude which sells First Amendment values, open expression values down the river or demotes it. I think this is a matter of re-scrambling the hierarchy, really, of what's more important and what's less important. And that has a pervasive influence on academia today. And we see it in the wider society, of course.
Do you think there are any advantages to feminization of these institutions?
Very few. I think, one aspect that I have spoken of is the fairness element of opening institutions to people from whatever background, whatever gender. That wasn't the practice decades ago. It's a relatively recent phenomenon. It applies not just to women, but also to minorities. The problem is when those people come in, they bring in their values and their prejudices and their priorities, and then they insist upon implementing them as a kind of lemma, corollary of being allowed to enter and participate and compete. The whole idea of competition is, of course, under attack. And I have stated, and I still believe this, maybe I'm naive, people tell me I am, I just don't get it, that the men who had control of the academy and dominated it really in recent times, this phenomenon is just decades old. I think the feminist takeover, the feminization, they should have resisted. I still don't understand why they gave in so readily to these demands and these values. I guess the short answer is they were as captured by this left-leaning ideology as, they are lefties. I mean, academia is a stronghold now of far left ideas. Wonderful essay recently in National Affair by Steve Tellis, who's at Johns Hopkins, who, acknowledges this, brings together all of the social science and materials that show that this is the case. And I guess they just either felt they couldn't resist, lacked the confidence to resist, weren't sure about whether the critique held any water. There was a lack of cultural confidence there. Personally, I think a lack of manliness, frankly, although people bristle when you use that term, to resist. You don't push back against the ladies. Well, you have to, especially when the ladies come to the fore. They don't stay in their separate sphere. You have to say, I'm sorry, girls, but you're not going to get your way on this.
I suppose this is one of the...
So, no, I'm not against school choice. I was the Placer County representative for the California referendum on school choice in 1992. I think school choice is a good idea. I don't think it has the transformation power that many of its advocates give it. All right, people's educational results are simply going to primarily align with their genetics. And I think overall public education in the United States does a pretty darn good job when you compare results by race. Right? America's public education system tends to get the best results for East Asians, for West Africans, for a lot of different groups. But overall, yes, good thing. I support school choice, but I don't think it is as transformative and dramatic and salvific as its advocates usually state.
Sometimes subtle ways in which women have always had power in society. We have power through men, right? That men will often find it difficult to, there's an urge to impress.
Well, men have power through women, right? When I have a woman in my life, an attractive woman in my life who likes to sleep with me, who admires me, who inspires me, who challenges me, all right, I have a lot more strength and a lot more energy, right? Men depend on women just as much as women depend on men. It's not like, oh, women only exercise their power through men. Men exercise their power through women. A man who can't get an attractive woman to go to bed with him is usually going to be much weaker than a man who is not in that unfortunate situation.
Press women, there's an urge to be
accommodating.
Yeah, and obviously with exceptions, but a lot of men have that sort of, yes, they will behave differently when women are around. And this is one of the ways in which women have always had often invisible but nonetheless important modes of power.
It's the downside of chivalry.
Right.
And, I mean, chivalry was kept within bounds because women were kept within bounds. I mean, let's be quite clear. There were many restrictions on women, collective restrictions on women and norms that held them back. And once those dissolved, chivalry became dysfunctional, because it goes too far. It's funny because one of my favorite expressions, and when I teach my students, I teach a course in conservative political and legal thought, which, is quite a heavy lift of a course there. But I always quote Lord Patrick Devlin, who was a conservative jurist in Britain in the late part of the 19th, early part of the 20th century. He said in his debate with H.L.A. Hart, and there's so much wisdom here, fornication will never be wiped out. Well, back then, fornication was considered, very undesirable. It will never be wiped out. The key is to keep it within bounds. Mm-hmm. And that expression, to keep it within bounds, is such a wonderful, useful, all-purpose trope for how we ought to govern our society and how we ought to govern academia, our institutions, vis-a-vis the demands of, the preferences of any given group that stood outside but now comes in to the equation. So yeah, men were in charge, but see, I have no problem with men being in charge because I see civilization as primarily the product of male efforts, imagination, drive, ability. I think it still is in many ways, and I think it will continue to be. So, to channel Camille Paglia, if we didn't have men, we'd all be sitting around in grass huts beating on tom-toms. They're the ones who've taken us out of that and created this glorious prosperity, the systems that we enjoy and take for granted. I think we ought to be a lot more grateful to men, show a lot more gratitude to men for their strengths and contributions than we do now. Of course, that's very unfashionable.
I don't disagree. I mean, I'm thinking about this question of sort of how do we respond to the feminization of public life? Because I agree with you that there are some very destructive consequences, particularly within the academy and particularly within some disciplines. One more optimistic view is that women have been in these roles.
Okay.
The havoc that women have wreaked and continue to wreak on institutions society-wide. They bring once again, different set of priorities and values that work within the spheres to which they were previously confined. They were the nurturers. They were the ones who, were supposed to empathize and bring compassion and unconditional love and try and be, make all the kids equal and that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously they didn't do that perfectly. They valued camaraderie. Well, that's really a masculine term, but getting along with people, a sort of a kumbaya atmosphere of, faux consensus and truth seeking, which can be very bruising and very hurtful and upsetting. That, isn't up there. So that is incredibly destructive, I think, and needs to be pushed back against very, very vigorously. Now, so I think
Amy Wax is so brave. I mean, this is Amy at her best.
I think the situation is worse than you make it out to be. There's, a lot of havoc that's been wreaked by feminization. There's also, of course, the whole other element, which you write about in your book, of male-female relations, which are, quite vexed now, quite difficult because of attitudinal polarization, political polarization, feminist demands, feminist.
I remember people in chat would castigate Amy Wax for, oh, why didn't you have children? And she has 3 kids. Right? People just carelessly toss off this and that and just spill their insights or lack thereof all over the dusty ground. And God is going to make them pay for each sperm that can't be found.
Skepticism about men, their nature, their contributions, the compromises that women have to make to live with men, everything imaginable. I was just thinking.
Why do we even listen to women when they talk? Well, because in some areas of life, women are more knowledgeable and more astute than men, right? Women are far better at reading people, usually, than men. Women are far better at deducing social cues, usually, than men. And there's just something special about women that gets me incredibly excited. But I shouldn't talk more about that.
Today, this may seem like far afield, but it's really not, of the rather funny phenomenon.
I mean, think about the glories of the Latina woman. Right, this is Andrew Schulz.
It's from them, okay? Don't fuck with that pull-out method with Latinas. You come on a Latin girl's stomach, her belly button just opens up and takes that shit in, dog. Like fucking hungry hippos in there, dog. You gotta come on her back. That's why they call them wetbacks. Now, guys, everybody, we're just getting started, guys. We're just getting started, okay? What's up, white boys? How was storming the Capitol? Good? You know they were there early too, huh? Day early, just tailgating and shit. I'm not gonna lie, yo. I miss Trump, man. Not like that. Calm down, QAnon. Fucking. It's a comedy special, not a Cracker Barrel. Relax, lady. Fucking. I'm not talking about the politics, okay? But the entertainment? Was that you, Indian girl? Oh, shit. I was about to say. You putting a non in QAnon for sure right there. Can we just be honest? It was entertaining as fuck. Right? Like for 4 years, he had our group chats on fire. It was unbelievable. You don't miss those texts like in the middle of the night from your boy, like, yo, turn on the news, he's making fun of crippled people. You're like, there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. He's the president of the United States of America. It's not me watching Breaking Bad. There's no way. He's making fun of crippled people. You turn on the news, full T-Rex, dog. Cocked his shit, dropped it, beating his chest like Matthew McConaughey, bro. It was every week. You remember that shit? Yo, turn on the news, he's shooting paper towels at Puerto Ricans. You're like, there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. This is impossible. Okay, they just had a hurricane, they're sitting in 4 feet of water. There's no way he went down there and shot the paper towels at these poor Puerto Ricans. You turn on the news, jab step, fade away. I don't care what your politics is, but it was an unbelievable time. Can we agree on that? It was an unbelievable time. And now we got Biden, and what a fucking snooze fest this guy is, dude. Just, he's boring. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's fucking boring, okay? Be honest. Is there anybody here who loves Joe Biden? We have any Taliban in here? Is there anybody? You're a Taliban? Go home, bro. You're free. You got your country back. You're not really Taliban. You're just Afghani. You're from Pakistan. That's not even the same shit, you racist motherfucker. And who's this black dude co-signing everything you're doing? What the fuck is going on up there? Wait a minute, are you black or are you where he's from? You're from Somalia. Hey! You changed up once you got over here, that's a fact. You got them braces. You are not the captain now. You fucking... Motherfucker was Captain Crunch. Did you see the teeth in that fucker's face? I'm just saying he's fucking boring. Like, be honest with me right now. Do any of you love Joe Biden? No. Right? Biden ain't got no merch. Like, that's how I judge presidents now, bro. Can you move merch or can you not? Because Trump had merch, bro. That MAGA hat was iconic. Bro, that was white people's teardrop tattoo. That's what that was. You saw a white dude with that hat, you were like, yeah! He don't give a fuck! In public, dog. In public, the hat is the last thing you put on your body before you leave the house. It's so easy not to wear it. But some people looked at that hat like, how difficult do I want my day to be? Fuck it, I choose violence today. I used to love seeing that hat in the wild, bro. Because I'm from New York. Nobody ever has a hat. You never see a MAGA hat in New York. So when I'm on the road, I'm just waiting for it. Because the energy around the hat was amazing.
right? Because the people that wear the MAGA hat, I don't know if you notice this, but they're always in the best mood, smiling ear to ear, just cheesed up. Because the hat does all the shit talk. Right? They're just walking around like, hey, Hector, how you doing? But the hat's like, we're building a fucking wall, Hector. We build that fucking wall, bro. MAGA, make amigos go away, Hector. You know what this is. I remember the first time I saw a MAGA hat confrontation. And these are the best. I'm talking about in real life. I'm not talking about on Twitter. I'm talking about real life MAGA hat confrontation. I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I saw, okay. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Actually, you know, I'm lying. I was actually in East St. Paul, but nobody knows what that is. So I said Minneapolis, but I had to be honest with you right now. Even though this is a fucking special taping, now we gotta edit around the whole goddamn thing. Fucking leave it in. Leave it in. This piece of shit in the balcony. I had to say, yeah, Minnesota. And I can't lie to you people. Okay? I was in fucking New Brunswick, New Jersey. No. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Okay? And I'm at a Baskin-Robbins, okay? And I saw a dude wearing a MAGA hat, and the fun thing about it was he wasn't ordering ice cream, he was working at Baskin-Robbins. Okay? And he wasn't a GM, he wasn't Baskin, he wasn't Robbins. He's just a regular minimum wage employee serving up ice cream, MAGA, bro. Just staring at people, vanilla only today. Just... Ain't gonna be no rainbow, no chocolate, nothing. Just pure Christian vanilla ice cream. The way God intended ice cream and countries to be made. So I'm staring at this dude, I'm like, yeah, this is going down. This is the guy, something's gonna happen, right? All of a sudden, this couple walks into the Baskin-Robbins, and the couple is wearing matching Vikings outfits, head to toe Vikings, okay? It's July. It's not even preseason. These are bona fide lunatics, these people just walking around town. Full Vikings outfits, right? The couple walks in. The girl in the Viking couple starts to get a little upset when she sees the MAGA hat. I don't know what she's saying, but I know it's white woman rage. I know what it is, right? I got a white fiance. I know about this stuff, okay? There's a problem that has nothing to do with me. I need to solve it, right? It's just... You're offended? I'm bored. Let's do something about it. I need to stand up for my black friends I don't have. Now, so, all of a sudden, the girl Viking breaks away from her boyfriend, beelines it for the MAGA hat dude, walks right up to him and goes, how the fuck could you wear that hat? Immediately, I'm like, he's shooting this bitch. This bitch is dead. This bitch is dead. She don't even know it. That's Second Amendment. She is fucking dead. I got my phone out, landscape. I'm ready. I'm ready. You think I'm missing this? You think I'm missing this? I zoomed out 0.5. I zoomed out 0.5. Some of y'all got Android phones. You too poor to even understand what that is. Okay? Get a real phone like an adult,
okay,
all right?
Let's
stop fucking up the group chat with your green text. We don't
the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
Not too much. I wanted to say it was good to see you smiling again tonight. I don't know if it was the comedian or what, but it was just good to see you smiling. Seemed like the world had been weighing heavy on you last time I talked with you.
Yes, it's good to be smiling, my friend. It's good to be happy again.
I just wanted to say on a side note that Louise Perry does something to me. She's a sexy woman, and she's my kind of gal. So I don't know. Everybody's got their type.
Yeah.
And somewhere between her and that singer from the 10,000 Maniacs, remember Natalie Merchant?
Not sure, but
okay. Well, Louise Perry is in the ballpark. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's a facsimile you're looking for, and it's starting to line up. You know, it's not an exact match, but it's close enough to where if we have a drink or two, I'm putting my moves on that gal. But anyway, I just wanted to say my I think I had two pet peeves for the night. One would be the difference in the way the media has black holed Trump being shot versus January 6th, where they wouldn't shut up and kept crowing for years. Can I get an amen on that, please?
Let me think. Well, it was. I'd have to think about it more, because I do think January 6th was significant, and I do think the Trump assassination attempt was significant, and I do think the news media has covered the assassination attempt, and
for 1 week they did, and then
they keep coming back. No, I think they keep coming back to it. I'd have to think about it more.
Okay, that's fair enough. My other pet peeve for tonight was I wanted to mention the fact that I don't like people who say they rescued animals. Do you know these people?
Yes, I mean, it's overwhelmingly single women, childless women.
Yes. They're jerking themselves off is what they're doing, patting themselves on the back. One time, 4 years ago, September 19th, 2020, I was driving up the mountain and saw this little kitten on the side of the road. And he was so starved, he couldn't even hold his back up. And, the car just drove itself into park there. And just seeing him, broke my heart. So I scooped him up and took him home and made it my mission to fix this thing. If he was going to die, he was going to die with dignity. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe I could fix him. He's the baddest motherfucker on 4 legs now. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And my point is, he redeemed me. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was my test. But it's nothing I should jerk myself off for. I didn't rescue him. He redeemed me. The world gave me a test, and I passed it because I'm that kind of person, and because I just can't look the other way. But that's nothing. That ain't. I didn't rescue. I didn't rescue anything. I'm the one that got the best end out of that deal. That's the cat. I've got several cats. That's the cat I got that when I call him, he comes in like a dog. He could be 100 yards away. He comes screaming in like a dog. So, awesome relationship. But those people, they piss me off when they say they rescued animals, because that's bullshit. They're just looking for gratification from people, and they should look into themselves of why they're doing, stuff like that, instead of trying to look out into the world. It just pisses me off. But anyway, I had a sociological question. I gave this question to my father, and I wanted to see what your answer was. My question to him was, he's got a big house on the lake, and I told him, I said, what if a pretty 49 or 50-year-old gal with her own boat just strolled right up to your dock on her pretty big old boat, and she started hanging out with you, and she said she had just got done with a bad relationship. She's got $20 million, wants a good man to spend it with, and y'all just get along just great. And somewhere in that first couple of days, she says, oh, by the way, I want a family. Now, my old man is 80. And I'll tell you what he said after you tell me what you said. You, as a 58-year-old man, it's probably not such a hard question if a 38-year-old woman strolls up to you just wanting to start a family, and she's checking all your boxes and got her own money and all that. But what about at 70 or 80? Where does Luke 40 draw the line on I'm too old for this shit?
Okay, it depends. Yeah, it depends in part on financial resources. So if you're a 70-year-old and you can leave $1 million behind to help, raise the boy, and let's say, for example, all my grandparents died around age 90. So by reasonable life expectation, it's got to be 90 or older. So I'd probably draw it around 70.
Okay, well, in my example, we'll just say she got 20 million in her own divorce, and she's got a boat bigger than yours that she's just strolled up to you to say hi on. So money is not an issue. So you're saying you're game till about 75?
Yeah, I'd say probably 70.
Mm, mm. Uh, the old man said no at 80, but he said maybe he would have said it at 70. So sounds like you're not too far different from my old man. But just for shits and giggles, want to guess the oldest father?
Oh, I mean, I know there are men into their 80s who've become fathers.
94.
Wow.
94. Isn't that ridiculous? So I just thought that was my dad, he's actually 80, but he says, at what point do I get to say I've earned the right to rest? That's where he was. It was the energy
Yeah.
recording. That was the thing that he went to. So anyway,
how many children does your dad have?
3.
Okay, so I noticed that men who have raised kids, when they hit their 50s and say they've gotten divorced, they're on the dating market, they're usually very reluctant to go through it all again. And then there are men such as myself who've never had kids, and we think it'd be great because we haven't been through everything that comes with raising kids.
Yeah, personally, I was like the family man, and now I feel like I've reverted to what you might want to say a caveman. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
you could see something just getting further and further away in the rearview mirror. And I think I maybe heard you say this. With me, the hard thing in life is the mundane shit. You know, just the mundane stuff. Just like checking the box on, oh shit, it's been 3 or 4 days since you've had a shower. Oh shit, this is the 3rd day in a row wearing those socks. Or like I noticed earlier this week that I'd had spaghetti 3 meals in a row, 3 days in a row for lunch. So for some reason, that's the hardest thing, it's just the simplest thing, because my mind does want more excitement than that. And it's the mundane things that seem to always catch up with me, that bite me in the behind. So I don't know. I found this when I was a manager, I found that sometimes that trait would lead me to what you might call managed by crisis. Oh, that's a terrible trait to have. Yeah. But it does test your mettle. You know what I mean? Because you're always starting fires. Because the stuff was too mundane to deal with until it's level 3, and now you got to deal with it. Yeah, so,
absolutely. I can resonate with much of that. I don't have those exact patterns, but I have other patterns. So I've never been known for being tidy, but I've also almost never been known for being a slob. So I'm kind of right in the middle. I keep average to slightly above average for a heterosexual male. But I do notice that men who aren't actively engaged in raising kids, and men who don't have close relationships with their children, they tend to be excitement seekers, while men who have normal relations with their children, they don't tend to seek excitement.
Right. One thing I was going to mention, and I don't know, it's a unique situation. I figured you might have questions for me. I dated a black girl at one time. Is that unusual? I mean, because I'm in flyover country, but when I think about that, I think you'll probably think that isn't even unusual. Even the fact that it was like in the 80s, or maybe it was the early 90s, that won't even strike you as being unusual, will it?
Well, it's not unusual if you're in your teens or 20s. You want to go out and you want to taste things that are different. I mean, I dated some black women in my 20s, usually black women with white girls' bodies. But I think it would be unusual for a normal man, say in his 40s, but I'm thinking about a friend of a friend. He got divorced, and all he did was date black women for a year. So I think he was around age 40, and he didn't want to marry any of them. He just wanted to have sex with a lot of women, and so he found that black women were incredibly excited to date him because he earned several $100,000 a year, and he just had a great time balling black women for a year.
Right. Yeah. I can, Bill Maher, he's one that has it's said that he has a fetish for black women. So I don't know. With me, it was just something that happened by happenstance. And as things happen, she was such an attractive black woman that, I don't know, I ended up getting a couple of other black women. Just was like, what's Kenya see in him? You know how women are like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You didn't do anything, but what's she see in you? You know, and they want it. Next thing you know, they're test driving you or whatever. So that's a strange phenomenon that women have. But anyway, I wanted to also kind of maybe close with the fact of maybe mention to you like the power of like Mother Nature. It's been years. When I told you my houseboat sunk a few years back, and although I'm a Buddha and I'm supposed to be bigger than that, sometimes it hurts because I remember some of the titles of some of the books that were on that boat, and they looked like crap afterwards, and I just had to throw them away. And one of the books was from a guy named Guy Murchie. It was something called like the 7 Mysteries of Life or whatever, and he was the one that first called it my attention of like how Mother Nature, from like the bees to human beings, Mother Nature has its like own agenda, and we're like we're just following along. Like you and I, when we become men, we had this outrageous sex drive that all it wanted to do is get our genes out there, you know, potentially, you know, for potentiality. Yes. That's all it cared about. But you and I was thinking nothing about genes, you know, we were thinking nothing about that. We didn't even think in terms like that. We were thinking having fun and getting drunk and finding the right woman and whoa, there's a party at so-and-so's tonight. But your Mother Nature had its own plan for you in the same way, like you look at the bees and the way they're getting the honey and the pollinating of the flowers, whatever, just a byproduct. But Mother Nature is like just 1 or 2 steps above, going, no, that's just exactly the way I wanted it. So some of the times when I gripe at you, I feel like I remember there used to be a commercial in the 70s, and the end of it would be like, it's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. And somehow when I see the way they do with 52 flavors of genders and all that kind of stuff, it makes me wonder, you know, the power of Mother Nature. And if for some reason she's going to have to show her hand, you know, I don't know. You got any thoughts on that before we close?
Yeah, so we're definitely biologically driven, but we're also tremendously culturally and psychologically driven. So I was seeking far more in sex than sex was designed to give, right? I was seeking, I guess, relief from my own internal pain, from feeling insecure and not good enough. I was seeking excitement. I was seeking to feel strong. I don't know, there was a desperation and a volatility to my sex life. It wasn't just seeking biological needs. I loved the emotional intimacy that would come after sex. So I was trying to meet all sorts of needs from sex that sex wasn't primarily designed to give. So for me, it wasn't just getting my rocks off, but for me, getting my rocks off symbolized and embodied, you know, all sorts of other comforts that I wasn't meeting through my real life. So often I was just failing in almost all my life, except my sex life. And so I was trying to hold myself together by developing this crazy sex life. And it was the balm for the failure and the humiliation that I was experiencing through the rest of my life. How about for you? Was sex just primarily about sex, or was it a distraction from deeper problems for you? Kip, you still there? Okay, lost Kip. Okay, so I want to get back to Amy Wax and her insights into the feminization of academia.
A few married women saying to me, my husband wants more sex than I want, you know, and I struggle with that because on the one hand, what's the big deal? On the other hand, I don't want it. And it gets me thinking about women's nature. I think, this is my theory, women have evolved to experience unwanted sex even too much sex in a marriage, right, as very dysphoric, as very aversive, more aversive than objectively it really should be, for evolutionary reasons, because they are the picky sex. They don't want to be, put upon by men who they consider undesirable fathers. So this is a kind of knee-jerk reaction that they have, right? So going back to my main point here, women in adopting, I think, a counter-natural hookup culture, some of the attitudes they've developed, denigrating their gatekeeping role on, social norms and male behavior, except as it's channeled through Me Too, which can be very destructive. They have, I think, kind of wrecked male-female cooperation to the point where we have plummeting marriage rates, plummeting birth rates, all of these phenomena, shrinking populations. That's the wages of feminism as well, not exclusively, but part of it. Now, in terms of taming men and all their bad impulses, they have lots of them, right? The bitter and the sweet, that is the story of masculinity. And, predatory sexual behavior is part of their evolved nature too. But, for all along, we have had norms in place, which have worked imperfectly, of course, of gentlemanliness, of, Judeo-Christian norms about monogamy and marriage and what it means to be a good husband, and a proscription on physical violence. I mean, all of this stuff is considered aberrational, not quote unquote acceptable. Once again, it doesn't always get tamed. The Me Too movement is in part a result of that. I think the Me Too movement has gone overboard in disruptive ways. If you will read this interesting 3-part article in the Wall Street Journal a week or so ago about this law professor named Josh Wright, who was the darling of Silicon Valley because he would do their bidding and argue their points of view about antitrust, but he had a wife with 3 kids and was balancing 3 or 4 mistresses, mostly his students and ex-students, okay? And I read this article with skepticism because some of these students and ex-students carried on affairs with him for years. And then when they're spurned, they turn around and accuse him of predation. They didn't feel like they could leave him because he had influence. Well, that's like generic. I mean, men can hurt you if you piss them off in a romantic relationship. That's a commonplace. But there's some bad faith there in these women turning around and accusing this guy and trying to get him into trouble. So there's a spectrum here of our modern response to men's cattishness and bad behavior, which I think requires some nuanced distinctions. But, shifting over to the female side, I think we need to hold some lines there and make some distinctions. And I don't see them being made in the academy and in any opinion shaping institution, frankly. I mean, female priorities is such an important part of wokeness. And it spills over into minority priorities, right? Because they want inclusion and belonging. They want to feel good. That means feeling good at all times and never hearing any criticism of them. It's really gotten to that point. I'm telling you, criticism is hurtful. Women say, oh, philosophy colloquia, where people duke it out and it can be really harsh. I've participated in such. Oh, we have to get rid of that. We have to get rid of, no holds barred, pull no punches, criticism, and social commentary. That goes too far. On both sides, I think the solutions are worse than the disease. The cures are worse than the disease.
I think that the level of intervention would be justified in order to return to a more masculine public life.
No, I think it requires a normative and cultural change. I think it's in the head. A lot of this is in the air and in the head. Just going back to me being countercultural, I said to my daughters, you need to be married by 30 and you need to have children. And, there's never a good time. Whatever your professional ambitions might be, just muddle through. I mean, I give them very practical advice because when you're 50 years old, you will be glad. They never see their life sort of as a whole. They never go and view the entire trajectory. It's really a strange thing that women are not encouraged to. They're encouraged to be very short-sighted. I think my husband puts it well in his typical laconic way. Rare is the woman who can reach the end of her life childless without regret. And rare is that woman. And I don't think that's going to change. So we're setting up for a lot of unhappiness. Now, you are absolutely right. Having children and, gearing for professional success at the very top of the food chain, they collide.
Okay, great conversation there with Amy Wax. I'll talk to you blokes later. Wait, no, there's a segment from here that I want to
attest to it.
Want to play for you.
I did that. I mean, my whole life was delayed. I would have had even more children, I think, if I got an earlier start. I mean, I was very much infected by the zeitgeist of you have to get career success, and only then can you have your children. So my last was born when I was 43. I was really lucky. But I say to my students, you're not going to be lucky. Your infertility is a misery, and it starts at 30. That's when your fertility is plummeting. Yeah, does it create difficulties? Absolutely. For that tiny number of really ambitious.
Okay, here's what I want to play.
And I say to my law students, and I'm considered like a total thorn in their side and countercultural person, mostly by my colleagues in the administration, not so much by the students, because the ones that approach me are actually curious, right? I say, your first job is to be professional. That means preserve, protect, and defend the system that we have built. But don't throw the whole thing over, right? It's the best we have and the best the world has produced. That attitude of gratitude and reverence towards the system that has been created, the sacrifices that have been made by our progenitors, our ancestors to create this, that is never taught. That is just considered right-wing quack, right? And that, is very pernicious. And that is the ethos that women imbibe. And my experience, this is anecdotal, is that the women fall for it hook, line, and sinker. The men do too, but they're more skeptical. There are more men who question the status quo dispensation of ideas that have made their way into the academy. Because the women love it. It has a certain emotional appeal, right? We're going to help people. We're going to make things better. We're going to enshrine progress as the ultimate good rather than preservation. Because the past is ugly, it's evil. It needs to be discarded as soon as possible. And that's the whole progressive shtick, right? Now updated to woke. And there they go. Out they come, right? And they're trying to do all of this. There are a million different pathways they can take to do it. All these organizations have grown up to absorb, this excessive elite class as a...
Okay, that